Hello and welcome back to On the Grid Podcast, Season 4, Episode 37. It is Las Vegas review time. Joining with me, as ever, is Adrian. How did you enjoy the weekend's Formula One? Did you get up for it, first of all?
I do admit, I did watch the entirety of qualifying. But I may have gone out drinking with the uni lads on the Saturday evening. So I had a very mixed decision of whether to go back to the hotel room and stay up till 6 o'clock, or get a few hours rest and then get up and then watch the race. So I'll make an admission that I did go to sleep for 2, 3 hours, then woke up at 6:05 and going, oh crap, the race is on. Flick the race on. Watched until about lap 25. Then fell asleep again, and then woke up with George Russell on the top of his car celebrating. So my memories of the Las Vegas Grand Prix are very vivid. Um, I did only watch technically half of a race, so you may have to carry this one. But I know most of the things that happened, and I know the ins and outs of things. After obviously a few days, we're recording this on the Thursday. No, on the Wednesday evening. Sorry, you'll be hearing this on the Thursday evening, I suppose. But yeah, very mixed bag. Can remember most things. But yeah, definitely an interesting one, and we have crowned a four-time world champion. So yeah, there's that bit of news as well. But yeah, it was a very interesting race. A lot of highlights, a lot of high moments for your team, and a lot of high moments for my team as well. But yeah, it was an interesting race. I'm gonna stop my waffle and let you get on with the episode.
Yeah, we'll get onto that in a moment's time. We'll start off with qualifying, and actually before that, I do have a little bit of egg on my face actually, because if for those of you who watched the Las Vegas preview episode, you will know that I severely underestimated Mercedes' chances, and that was actually recorded on Thursday evening. And I woke up on Friday morning, looked at the practice results, and saw Lewis Hamilton top both sessions. And then George Russell went on to top P3, and then going into qualifying, Mercedes were firm favourites. So I did look a bit of an idiot. As it was in Q1, George Russell led Lewis Hamilton 1 and 2, with Max Verstappen shortly behind. In terms of those going out, though, Sergio Perez, yet another Q1 exit. And again, he's got to be under some pressure, doesn't he?
Surely his time is up. It's slowly counting down the days of Sergio Perez in Formula One. Um, yeah, it's yet another. I wouldn't even say a shock, because we're expecting Sergio Perez to be out in Q1 or in Q2. It's more likely that he's out in those two sessions than he is making it through to Q3. So if you actually look on the face of it, are we surprised? I don't think I am. Red Bull obviously had their separate issues with their rear wing, not bringing the right spec rear wing for Las Vegas, and they had troubles there. Obviously, Max Verstappen's not going to have troubles because he's Max Verstappen, but Sergio Perez got obviously the worst of it, and he wasn't able to perform. But again, I'm not really surprised that he's out in Q1. It's another shocking result, and it just kind of points the way of Red Bull of why they should get rid of him, why they should replace him, and they should get one of the youngsters in as soon as possible, because Sergio Perez, when he came into Red Bull, shone with consistency, but ever since his contract extension in Monaco, obviously, it's just all gone downhill. So yeah, I think the time is slowly running out for Sergio Perez.
I'm not sure if it is that slowly running out anymore, is it? It seems to be very quickly running out. Yet another poor performance when his teammate puts it 11 places higher on the grid. Also out in Q1 though, both Aston Martins, Fernando Alonso qualifying 17th, Lance Stroll dead last. And it does feel like that car has whatever they were doing right last season, they're doing the opposite this season. And also out in Q1, Alex Albon and Valtteri Bottas in 18th and 19th. Moving on to Q2 then, and one of the big surprises is Zhou Guanyu qualifying all the way up in 13th place in what is his best qualifying of the season. Not a bad effort from the Chinese driver. Obviously, it's too little too late in terms of getting a seat for next season, but it's good to see that he has got that speed in there somewhere.
Yeah, I was gonna say something about Zhou Guanyu because he's been Mr. Consistent when it comes to qualifying. He's either 19th or he's 20th. So in that aspect, you can say he's Mr. Consistent consistently on the back row of the grid. But in the aspect that Kick Sauber are looking at, they're obviously a truck. It's the car is a tractor on wheels. And for him to get it through to Q2, obviously beating his teammate, his more experienced teammate in the process, who could only qualify 19th but did have a grid penalty regardless. It's a tremendous effort, and an effort that definitely won't go under the radar. Whether he can secure a seat somewhere else, whether it's in IndyCar or a different championship, that's yet to be seen. But um, it's a good performance. And for a driver that's been very low on confidence and unable to get his car out of Q1 on most occasions, it's definitely a good outlier because it's definitely not one that we see on regular occasions. But it was still a great performance from Joe Guanyu.
Yeah, absolutely. And Franco Colapinto qualifying 14th, but had a big crash on his final lap, which brought immediate halt to proceedings and shortened the session. That's his second big crash in consecutive races. Must be a little bit of a concern, given he was basically brought in as a safe pair of hands away from somebody who was consistently destroying the car.
He's the next Logan Sargent who just it looks like Ayrton Senna. He's got his face and his demeanor and everything just give you Ayrton Senna vibes. But when it comes to crashes, he's as good as Logan Sargent. It was unfortunate because this is Franco's first ever Las Vegas experience. And to experience an impact of 50G is not what you want. Obviously the crash was very hard. Obviously came off one Tech Pro barrier going into another. And it's not what you like to see. But I think it's a learning curve. I know Williams are topping the crash chart. I think they're on about $10 million worth of damage to their cars. So it's when it comes to the budget cap as well, they're not coping very well. They might just be on the brink of reaching the budget cap in that sense because when it comes to damages, parts and repairs are very costly. And like you mentioned there, Franco was brought in to be a safe pair of hands that will not crash. Obviously, Alex Albon's has had his troubles as well. Both cars had troubles in Brazil. But Franco, just I don't know. I really don't know. One day you have one weekend you have a fantastic Franco Colapinto, and another weekend you just have him crashing. That's obviously you're looking at three crashes within the last two races for Franco Colapinto. Because he obviously had his incidents in Brazil, two incidents in Brazil, and then he's had his incident in Las Vegas. But with that being said, it was unfortunate to see Franco clash it with the barrier once again. But Williams, I reckon, will start to get a little bit concerned with the budget cap and what they can do with parts and stuff because the budget cap and the money comes at you thick and fast, and with them having to repair the car more or less every weekend, with this being also a triple header, it's going to make it extremely hard for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Liam Lawson also out in Q2, qualified 15th. Kevin Magnussen and Esteban Ocon just missing out on the top 10 shootout. Moving on to Q3, and it was George Russell who claimed a third pole position of the season. A fantastic effort from him to put it on the front row. He's popped up regularly this season. I think he's had a very understated year this season, George Russell. And it goes to show he can be that guy to lead Mercedes forward when Lewis Hamilton leaves, doesn't it?
Well, he kind of doesn't have a choice, does he, next season? because Lewis Hamilton has gone to Ferrari. But yeah, like you mentioned, George, he's another driver that's had a bit of an up and down season. We've said it all season long. He's had a couple of weekends where he's performed absolutely fantastically, but then he has a little bit of a dip of in form. Whether it can be down to the car as well, it's another question because Mercedes this weekend in Vegas just gone, their car was just on absolute fire. And you had to bite your tongue, I had to bite my tongue. And I was absolutely gobsmacked at how Mercedes performed in Vegas. But Russell was right up there when Hamilton couldn't put the lap in. Russell did, and it shows that after these few seasons that Russell's had kind of under the wing of Lewis Hamilton. I think he's gained tremendous experience from the seven-time world champion. And he's kind of showing the abilities of what he can bring to the team as a team leader. And he was able to do so in Vegas, perform fantastically in qualifying, perform fantastically in the race. Did something that Lando Norris can very, very rarely do, which is get pole position and win from it. And yeah, he ticked all the right boxes. He did all the right things in Vegas, and he just showed that Mercedes have got very capable hands of a team leader next season with George Russell.
Carlos Sainz qualified in second with his teammate Charles Leclerc in fourth, but it was Pierre Gasly's Alpine that split the two in third place. And you're thinking from that point, are Alpine going to do the same as what they did in Brazil?
Yeah, Pierre Gasly, like you mentioned in P3 there, I was very, very shocked to even see Pierre Gasly in Q3. But what a tremendous performance. I did mention on a preview podcast about Esteban Ocon, and we were talking about his helmet and whether he's going to whip out a Captain America type worthy qualifying session or even a race. But it was actually Pierre Gasly that did that. Unfortunately, it didn't materialize in the race, as we'll talk we'll talk about a little bit later on. But yeah, qualifying, it just seemed to hit the nail on the head. Got the right lap at the right time and split the two Ferraris and did so fantastically.
Absolutely, yeah. And then for the rest of the top 10, Max Verstappen lined up alongside Lando Norris. Yuki Tsunoda splitting the two McLarens with Oscar Piastri in eighth, Nico Hulkenberg in ninth, but it's 10th place for Lewis Hamilton, making a crucial error on his final lap, which on a lap which without that would have almost certainly been good enough for the front row at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Lewis Hamilton, it's very tricky because we talked about obviously the pace of a Mercedes in practice and in qualifying. George Russell and Lewis Hamilton were completely on it all weekend long. But one little mistake costed Lewis Hamilton in qualifying and especially in Q3. And he said it even in the TV pen after qualifying. He said P10, it might be a little bit too far fetched to get anything from this place. But we know that when Lewis Hamilton turns it on, he turns it on to the max. And even though he did make that mistake, he made up for it in the race. And it's those little mistakes. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton was determined to get as high up as possible. But like you mentioned there, a tiny bit of a mistake, and it cost him a front row. So it could have even been sweeter for Lewis Hamilton this weekend, but I'm pretty sure he's not going to downplay what happened on the Sunday morning for us, but the Saturday evening in Vegas.
Yeah, I think pretty much everybody would say after that performance in the race, we'll get onto it, but it very easily could have been a victory. But we'll head across now to do our 1 to 10 driver ratings. And we'll start off with George Russell, qualified first, finished first, and it's an easy 10 out of 10 for me. I don't know what more he could have done. He managed to pace fantastically well, looked so assured, and it was a very, very dominant victory. Obviously, I think having that advantage come the second round of stops really helped him because he had 5 lap fresher tyres than Hamilton. come the end of the race and could manage the pace a little bit better. Hamilton was always fighting that. But a brilliant effort from Russell and a well-deserved victory. Second victory of the season, and he probably deserves a third if we're counting Spa as well.
1 out of 10 for George Russell. Well, 1 times 10 equals 10 out of 10. I don't think I can add much more from what you just said. He had a fantastic race. Did very little wrong. Literally, like I mentioned, talking about qualifying, ticked box after box after box. Fended off the Ferraris very well at the start. And just controlled it from then on in. So yeah, it's a well deserved 10 out of 10 for George Russell.
Lewis Hamilton up next. He qualified in 10th, as we said, and then finished second. I've also gone for a 10 out of 10. Now, I could see why somebody might go for a 9 out of 10 here, given the fact that it was his mistake in qualifying that cost him and essentially cost him the win. Like we said, I think based on the fact he was 5 seconds behind and after he stopped, he was about 13 seconds behind after the final round of pit stops. I could see why somebody would argue that he's cost himself a race victory this weekend, but I've got to go for a 10 out of 10 just because of how dominant he was and pulling out fastest lap after fastest lap was exceptional. He was on a mission and nobody was stopping him getting at least a P2. He made it look easy.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you on a 10 out of 10, but I have actually settled for a 9 out of 10, and I do. You perfectly wrapped up the why I went for a nine. It's because of that qualifying mistake. If he qualifies higher up, I think he's nailed on for the victory. I think if he qualifies on the front row, he's more or less bound to get the win from George Russell, because he was good enough all weekend long to be right up there. Obviously, still finished P2, which is fantastic. But I think being the distance away from George Russell that he was, I think he was a couple of seconds back at the end of the race. That could have easily been wiped off, and it easily could have been another race victory for Lewis Hamilton, but it wasn't meant to be. So I've given Lewis Hamilton a grade lower than George Russell. George Russell obviously being the lead Mercedes driver, and me gifting him a 10 out of 10. So I've settled with a 9 out of 10, but I'd also agree on a 10 out of 10 for Lewis Hamilton, just on the sort of mission that he was on throughout that whole race. But I've settled with a 9 personally.
Carlos Sainz next, qualified in second and finished third. I've gone for a 9 out of 10 because I don't know. I don't think there's much more he could have done really. He qualified on the front row, as we said, and then was very assured. I think he was quicker than Leclerc. I know there's a bit of drama around the team orders. But from my point of view, Sainz almost played the team game, letting Leclerc through before the second round of pit stops. If Ferrari were that concerned, then they would have pit Leclerc first. They would have pit Leclerc first and allowed him to come out ahead of Sainz. And that would have meant as well, or, in actual fact, they had about 20 laps to go after the second round of pit stops to sort the order out. Why didn't they do it then? So I think this is blown out a little bit of proportion. It's probably not helped by Leclerc's team radio, but they had the time to sort that mess out. So I feel like it's a bit of a nothing point. So I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Sainz. I thought he performed really well.
And I'll agree with you on that one as well. I've also given Carlos Sainz a 9 out of 10 because to qualify on the front row, I mean he was on provisional pole for some time, but until George Russell stole it, and then to claim a podium as well. I mean, like you mentioned there, team orders with Charles Leclerc, I think were blown a little bit out of proportion. I obviously saw the meme of Charles Leclerc telling his race engineer to tell Carlos Sainz in Spanish not to attack him, which I found very funny. But I'm still a firm believer that Carlos Sainz, whenever he's on his day, he's one of the best drivers on the grid. Better than Leclerc on his day. But I mean, Carlos Sainz, I don't think he's playing the Team Ferrari game at the moment. There's 3 races left. Well, 2 races now, but they were racing 3 races to go. He's playing Team Carlos Sainz. He doesn't give a damn of what the team orders are. He's fighting basically for himself. Um, with that being said, Ferrari are in a championship battle in the constructors, so maybe Carlos Sainz kind of needs to tone down the Team Carlos propaganda and go with the Team Ferrari for a little bit. But it was still a very good podium. I don't think he was able to kind of get anywhere near the Mercedes drivers during the race, but still a well executed podium finish.
Charles Leclerc up next. He qualified fourth and finished fourth. It's an 8 out of 10, a solid performance. But obviously I don't want to give him as high as Science because Science was the one that got the podium. Obviously, like we mentioned about the theme orders, but I don't think that's a massive issue. I do think Science was quicker throughout the whole weekend, which is why I've just gone for one lure for Leclerc. But you could have put anything that I said for Science as applicable to Leclerc. Second quickest car this weekend, then they secured third and fourth. I do feel like they'll think it's a missed opportunity with McLaren being so poor. They couldn't make further inroads into the constructors' advantage they have over Ferrari. But hey ho, it's a good result for them.
Yeah, I've also gone for a grade lower than Sainz for Leclerc. I've also gone for an 8. With that being said, obviously Ferrari have gained well, not significantly, but they have gained points on McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. I think they gained, I want to say, 13 or so points onto McLaren. So it's still a good points haul for Ferrari, and obviously McLaren are, could you say, slowly fading away from the Constructors' Championship after what happened in Vegas. And Ferrari are slowly starting to close the gap. But like we mentioned for a few episodes now, little by little, I think Ferrari could win this championship with 2 races to go. Obviously, there's still a sprint race to contest as well. Loads of points for an offer, and if Ferrari can finish like these 3 and 4 with McLaren potentially 5 and 6 or 6 and 7, 7 and 8, it still could well and be truly on. But Leclerc, same applicable to Carlos Sainz, nowhere near the Mercedes drivers, and I think Carlos Sainz was the better of the 2 Ferrari drivers this weekend. So that's why I've also settled for an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, so 13 points, like you said, but Ferrari have gained this weekend, and there's 24 points in it. So essentially, they need to have two more weekends like they've just had, and they'll just about snatch the Constructors' Championship, which would be a massive steal away from McLaren. But moving on now to fifth place man and four-time world champion Max Verstappen. First of all, a very, very impressive campaign, despite having the second, third, or even fourth quickest car for many races this season. He's the guy that sets the standard, and it's been a fantastic season from him. I think particularly these last 6 or 7 races where the pressure's been on. And it's like Lando Norris said in his post-race interview, is that when Verstappen has the quickest car, he wins every race. When he doesn't have the quickest car, he's still there. He's still in the fight. And that was shown again this weekend. He was running P2 for a long time, and then only lost out on the podium towards the latter stages of the race with the Ferraris on the fresher tyres. But an 8 out of 10 for me for this weekend, qualified in fifth and finished fifth. He was deserving of the championship, just by the standards he's set all season long and being able to pull it out of the bag time and time again.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree with you on this one again. I've also gone with an 8 out of 10 for Max Verstappen. Like you said, he's set the gold standard for the last 3 seasons. I think obviously in 2021 it was very tight between him and Lewis and the controversy of Abu Dhabi, which we don't need to dwell in and delve into in this episode. That can be saved for many episodes later on down the line when we've got nothing to talk about and we can talk about championship battles once again. But this weekend, obviously Max Verstappen is a warrior and he's always going to be there or thereabouts. In qualifying, obviously he was outclassed by a shocking Pierre Gasly and the 2 Ferraris and George Russell. But in the race, like you mentioned, he only just lost out on the podium places because the 2 Ferraris were on the better tyres. and he faded away to P5. But to say that he is in arguably this weekend, probably the fourth fastest car, if you look at the face of things, because McLaren probably didn't have the best of weekends. The Mercedes and Ferrari were on top. And you can even look at an outlier of Pierre Gasly in the Alpine or even Nico Hulkenberg. Could you say that they were a bit quicker, or even Yuki Tsunoda in the V car? Because with the with what Helmut Marko said that Red Bull's loss were down the long straight. I think it was 6 tenths or something that they were losing each lap down the long back straight. So um, to see Max Verstappen still slap bang in the middle of the top 10 in P5, it just shows what sort of driver he is and a worthy four-time world champion. He joins an illustrious duo of Alain Prost and Sebastian Vettel as a four-time world champion. So he's in great company there. This weekend probably the best he could have done with the car and the spec that it had on the Red Bull. But still, what a campaign, what a season for Max Verstappen, and this race showed what sort of heart and desire and a warrior mentality as he has, and he secured his championship. So yeah, very worthy P5 finish, 8 out of 10, and a fantastic campaign for Max Verstappen.
Lando Norris next qualified sixth and finished sixth, and it's 6 out of 10 for me. I feel it's very average. It was very underwhelming given that this was Lando Norris's, as it turned out, last chance to make a championship push. I know the McLaren wasn't the quickest, but you got to think it was quicker than the pace that both those drivers showed. I know the conditions probably didn't suit their car and them, but I still to be so anonymous in what is your last opportunity, it's not a great look. 6 out of 10, and I don't know what more to say really. It's I'm sure it'll be a disappointing one for McLaren that they've fought so hard. They've had such a good car for the majority of the season, yet they fell short with 2 races to go.
Like we've mentioned on so many episodes, Lando Norris just has had a similar campaign to Charles Leclerc. Too many mistakes. The car is absolutely rapid, and you're not able to capitalize on what you have underneath you. I've said with the same as you. 6 out of 10 for Lando Norris, very anonymous. I think he was 20 or so seconds behind Max Verstappen at the end of a race. So that kind of shows you what race Lando Norris had, and yeah, for McLaren is seriously about securing that constructors championship because Ferrari are coming, and there's obviously a big chance that they could take the lead in Qatar if all things go their way. Um, that's yet to be seen. We don't know whether it will actually happen, and I'm not jinxing anything. Touch wood. But McLaren are, I think they are seriously in trouble. And just it shows just on this race alone, they didn't have the quickest car, but both their drivers were very anonymous. And couldn't make any further inroads onto the top five. So yeah, 6 out of 10 for Lando Norris.
Oscar Piastri up next, qualified in eighth and finished seventh. And I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for Piastri. Again, like I said, for between the Ferraris, everything I said for Norris could be applicable here. Very, very quiet, and was miles off it. So it's a 5 out of 10. I think he's benefited by there being such a golfing class between the top four teams and the rest of the field. And that's why he's got the P7 when, if the field was tighter, that could be a bit more pronounced, that difference between Norris and Piastri. So that's why I've gone slightly lower for Piastri, a 5 out of 10. And it's been a bit of a weird few races for Piastri. He's gone a bit quiet.
I've gone with the same grade that I gave for Lando Norris for Oscar Piastri. I gave him a 6 out of 10. That's purely given down on the fact that he gained a place from his qualifying position and finished P7 instead of P8. But same things could be said for Oscar Piastri that were said for Lando Norris. Very flat, very quiet, very anonymous. And like I said, I think McLaren are a little bit in trouble when it comes to the constructors' title because both of their drivers just look very flat and on their haunches and don't know what to do with themselves because they are. I don't know whether they're experiencing a little bit of a blip, but I think they're struggling just a tad.
Moving on now to best of the rest, and it is Nico Hulkenberg once again. He qualified in ninth and finished eighth. And I think unsurprisingly, it's a 9 out of 10 for Hulkenberg. Fantastic effort yet again. Playing some very good points for Haas. Closes the gap on Alpine in sixth. And yeah, like I said, very, very good effort. Four valuable points, I'm sure, come the end of the season.
Yeah, I've also settled with a 9 out of 10 for Nico Hulkenberg. We're going toe to toe with these ratings because I think most of these drivers, when you look at the face of what happened in Vegas, not a lot happened when it came to position changes within the top 10. Um, Apart from obviously Lewis Hamilton being the outlier there, gaining 8 places from his starting position. But with Nico Hulkenberg, I think you just think consistency, and he's been consistently qualifying inside the top 10, and he's just been gaining points finishes after points finishes after points finishes, and to be best of the rest again, just shows the character and what he's got, and I think Haas will miss him a lot next season when he goes off to Sauber ahead of obviously the Audi takeover, because what they're going to have next season is obviously Esteban Ocon, who's very experienced and obviously has a couple of podiums under his name, unlike Nico Hulkenberg. But I don't think Esteban Ocon has experienced that consistent points finishing this season, especially with Alpine being so bad. They'll obviously have Ollie Behrman, who's a rookie and who's obviously a fresh face, young blood into the team, and has obviously shown what sort of talent he's got. But I don't think you can get a driver of such a consistent nature that can drive a team forward like Nico Hulkenberg. And he shows it race upon race, weekend upon weekend. And this weekend was exactly the same. Qualifying P9, finishing P8. It just shows what sort of driver and what sort of missed opportunity we could have seen with Nico Hulkenberg if he was able to gain that podium finish many moons ago, and maybe he can still replicate it and get a points finish when Sauber turned to Audi. But for now, consistent performance points finishing is Nico's middle name. It's a very long middle name, but I'm sticking with that middle name for Nico Hulkenberg because it shows what sort of driver he is, what sort of ability he still possesses, and what sort of hunger he has to continue performing in Formula One.
Yuki Tsunoda next, qualified in seventh and finished ninth, and it's an 8 out of 10 for me. Yet another very, very good performance from Yuki. And I think this happened at a time of the season where he's needed it. Obviously, Liam Lawson coming in and putting in some good performances, particularly at Kota. Would have there was a talk that he could come in and take the Red Bull seat, but I think Tsunoda's done well to sort of steady the ship and basically say, no, remember who I am. I'm still the top guy around here. And yeah, put some respect on my name. And he's done that. And yet another fantastic performance. You could even bump it up to a 9 and I wouldn't have any complaints.
And that's exactly what I have done. I've bumped it up to a 9 out of 10. Because to qualify in P7 is no mean feat. To qualify ahead of a McLaren and a Mercedes is no mean feat. Obviously he lost out on the positions to Nico Hulkenberg and to Lewis Hamilton, but that's not to say that he's not had a very good race and a very good weekend because he has. He's shown the capabilities that he's got, and he even said it himself that, like you mentioned there, Red Bull, I think, need to look at Yuki Tsunoda as an option for the big dogs, the big team in Red Bull, because he's been in the sport for a couple of seasons now, and he's shown it not maybe on a consistent level, but in flashes. He's had the flashes of moments. maybe they want a driver with consistency at Red Bull because, come on, realistically, Red Bull have been challenging for constructors' titles, for drivers' titles for many years now. Maybe they want a driver that can do it on a consistent basis, and whether Yuki Tsunoda can deliver that for them, it's yet to be seen because, like I've mentioned, he's very hit and miss. But this weekend, certainly a hit. And Yuki Tsunoda was able to outperform his rookie teammate, get into the points, and prove to Red Bull that he's no walkover. And that he can actually perform when it matters. So I gave him a 9 out of 10, but I think Yuki Tsunoda just needs to hit the ground running if he is to challenge for a spot at Red Bull next season or season after.
Next up is the man who he's very much linked to replacing, and that's Sergio Perez, qualified in 16th and finished 10th. I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for Checo. He obviously produced that fantastic double overtake, which I'm still baffled as to how all three cars got through there with no sort of damage or anything like that. So that was a highlight for him, but I think that's probably about the only thing he had to really shout about this weekend. Another Q1 exit, and he's got 1 point in the last six. I think it's the last six Grand Prix. Verstappen's got round about 100 points, and Perez has 9. So that's the reason Red Bull aren't leading the championship. Obviously, you don't need somebody to be doing what Max Verstappen's doing, but the fact that Red Bull are only 50 points behind McLaren, and they're basically fighting with one arm behind the back because Sergio Perez's results recently have been shocking, just goes to tell you everything you need to know. And if you've got a driver if it was Tsunoda, he doesn't even have to be on Verstappen's level. He just needs to be performing at a level which is helping them. Whereas Perez is basically doing nothing. He's basically not helping whatsoever, actually causing them a bit of hardship with the lack of points he's bringing in.
I've gone with a 4 out of 10, and I'm going to play it short and sweet. The less said about this man, the better, because, like you mentioned, Red Bull signed a Mexican Minister of Defense when he came to the team after his stint at Force India and Racing Point and what he delivered, especially when it came to was it the Bahrain or was it Sakir? I think it was Sakir Grand Prix. When he absolutely bossed it, came from the back of the grid essentially and won the race. And ever since that point, it's just kind of been very much his first season was very good, but then from that point onwards, it's just gone on a downward trajectory, and the trapdoor is beginning to open up even more and more for Sergio Perez because Red Bull don't need a driver who's driving in a car just for the sake of sponsorship and money for the team. They need a driver that can help Max Verstappen close the gap on a McLaren, on a Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship and help the team to gain valuable money when it comes to prize money and victories and 1-2 finishes and trophies. Sergio Perez hasn't delivered that for the last season or two. And this race, yeah, he came back from P16/P15 to get into the points, but it's a single point in a Red Bull. What more do you want me to say? There's not much more I can say. Sergio Perez trapdoor is beginning to open very largely, and his exit from Formula One is looming ever closer.
Yeah, it's like you say, Red Bull are a team that have dominated the last 3 or 4 years. What is that saying about sport if that is the case where Red Bull actually need the sponsorship money from Sergio Perez to survive? A team who have won the last 4 drivers' championships, the last 2 constructors' championships before this year. What does that say about sport when they're so reliant on that sponsorship money, if that is the case? Fernando Alonso up next, qualified 17th and finished 11th. And I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for Fernando Alonso. A very, very solid drive from the back of the grid. I think he was in the fight for points, but just couldn't quite get there, didn't quite have the speed to sort of beat a driver like Perez. But given the circumstances he was in, I think he's done a decent job. So 7.
I've gone with a 6 out of 10 for Fernando Alonso. Like you mentioned there, he wasn't able to edge out Sergio Perez for a points finish. But I still think he did a good enough job. I think when it comes to Fernando Alonso and the Aston Martin, we said this about their previous season and the season before that. They ended the season on a high. Well, no, they ended the season on a low. I believe it was the season before Alonso made a switch. Then they started the season very well. Then it was down. Then it was up. Then it's down. They're very much a yo-yo club. If you look Premier League sake, we can call them like a Norwich or a West Brom of the Premier League. They're up and they're down. They're up and they're down. They're up and they're down. But right now they are down, and it's similar to a Norwich or West Brom to any football fans that are watching and listening. Both of those teams are down in the second tier of English football, and it's similar to Aston Martin. I don't think they're anywhere near closing the gap to the top four teams, and they're just stuck at the moment. They're just stuck in a hole and in a gap. And Alonso's not having the best time of it, but obviously better times are up ahead. Adrian Newey has signed. The car will probably be absolutely fantastic. We'll probably end up seeing him win race after race after race when Adrian Newey's designs hit the building. But for this race and this weekend for Fernando Alonso, it was a little bit average. So that's why I've gone with a six.
Up next is Kevin Magnussen, qualified 12th and finished 12th, and it's a 6 out of 10 for me. Very, very solid without being exceptional. Obviously, his teammate steals the headlines by getting that fantastic eighth place finish. But it was a good performance from Magnussen. I think he's had a few good races recently, and he's I think he's going out with his head held high, even though there was no points today. He's been very solid.
Yeah, I'm gonna settle with a 6 out of 10. Very, very decent drive from Kevin Magnussen. Still a couple of races to go in his Formula One career, but um, he just didn't have what it takes to finish him a points. I think the 11 drivers ahead of him were that touch bit better. And yeah, I don't think I can really add much more onto what you said. Just a decent little drive and a nice little afternoon slash evening for Kevin Magnussen, just trotting along, doing his own thing, and yeah, bowing out uh, bowing out from Formula One with kind of some decent performances here and there. But I think the last two races are going to be the ones that kind of show us what Kevin Magnussen's all about, and I hope they do, because it's obviously the end. Well, we say the end in quotation marks. He could come back with a Haas once again. We saw that happen before, and it could happen again. But for this race, it's very firmly a 6 out of 10, a decent performance, and a good one to kind of start his final triple header.
Franco Colapinto next, qualified 14th and finished 13th. And for me, it says 5 out of 10. I've taken a mark off because of the big crash he had. I know he started from the pit lane, obviously, so he's gained a fair few places, but I kind of have to take into account the turmoil that those poor Williams mechanics must be going through recently.
Where
So
Joe finished 13th.
is it Joe that finished 13th? So Franco Colapinto qualified 14th and finished 14th. Yeah, I'm going to stick with
We've
five
not
out.
talked about
So
Joe.
we'll go on to Joe in a minute. We'll go on to Joe in a minute. I've started talking about Colapinto now. So yeah, I've gone for a 5 out of 10 for Colapinto. 14th place, not a bad effort, but obviously had the big crash.
Well, all I'm going to say is Brad, the editor's going to have a nice time of editing this out. Um, so I'll actually start talking about 13th place Guan Yu Zhou and talk about Franco Colapinto as well. Because yeah, Guan Yu Zhou, I've actually gone for a 7 out of 10 for Guan Yu Zhou. Obviously, arguably his best race in Formula One since his points on his debut, if you can say if he can say that. Um, and I think he had a very steady race. Was obviously a couple of seconds behind Kevin Magnussen and Fernando Alonso for the battle for 11th and 12th. Kind of had a steady race and was able to fend off Colapinto, who was in 14th, not 13th. And I gave Colapinto a 5 out of 10. Yeah, just I think that crash kind of marked him down a little bit. And I think it could have been a lot better for Franco Colapinto had he hooked that lap up in qualifying. I think his Williams car was looking quite racy, but unfortunately it wasn't meant to be. And yeah, so a 7 out of 10 for Joe Guan Yu and a 5 out of 10 for Franco Colapinto.
Now, the Guan Yu Zhou qualified 13th and finished 13th, and I've actually gone for an 8 out of 10. I thought it was a fantastic effort for Zhou, who we've criticised a lot this season, and rightfully so. But he was running in the points for a large portion of that race. I think he was running as high as eighth at one point. I think that final pit stop though kind of put him behind. I don't know how well Sauber did with the strategy. But then he did fight his way through because I think he was down at about 18th when he came out of the pits. So to get back up to 13th is not bad going. And like we said, although it's come at too late to save his F1 career, I think he can go out with a bit of respect in what has been an awful car this season, and he's got a good performance to show for it at the end. So 8 out of 10. And then next up, Lance Stroll qualified 20th and finished 15th. I've gone for a 4 out of 10. I don't really have anything else to say. Not a good performance. He's inherited two of those positions through DNFs. So yeah.
Agreed. 4 out of 10 for Lance Stroll. Let's move on.
Liam Lawson next qualified in 15th and finished 16th. I've gone for a 5 out of 10 because I feel like there's some left on the table from Liam Lawson. I just think that at this stage of his career, it's very, very crucial he puts in those massive performances because he could be in in a Red Bull else if he did perform, but it's not quite. He's been beaten by his teammate and well beaten as well. Um, so a little bit disappointed is I'm sure how Liam Lawson will be feeling following this race. But as it is, 5 out of 10, solid, but nothing special.
I've actually gone with a 4 out of 10 for Liam Lawson for this weekend. Um, I'm only doing this purely on the basis of how well Yuki Tsunoda performed because, like you mentioned there, Liam Lawson, if he plays his cards right, he could be in a Red Bull. And these performances are crucial to show Red Bull why you are a top contender. Like I mentioned previously, it's all about consistency, and I think if when you look on the face of things, when you look at Yuki Tsunoda versus Liam Lawson, he has been very up and down. But Liam Lawson, I just feel he's a lot better than that. It's his first race weekend in Vegas. Okay, let's put that behind because it's only Yuki Tsunoda's second because this is the second running of the new Las Vegas Grand Prix. So if you actually look on the face of it, Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda, I think, are very evenly matched in their abilities. But I think when it came to Yuki Tsunoda this weekend, he outperformed Liam Lawson tremendously, and Liam Lawson was a little bit underwhelming in Vegas when it came to his race performances. So that's why I've gone for a 4 out of 10. It's a bit of a missed opportunity for Liam Lawson.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Esteban Ocon next, qualified 11th and finished 17th. So I've actually gone for a 5 out of 10 for Esteban Ocon. I know on the face of it, it's not a good performance at all. But considering as he said that he lost communication with the team on the first lap, I think it was, and when he came into the pits, there was one mechanic to greet him. I don't think it's too bad going. Very disappointing, I'm sure, considering as he's qualified up in 11th. He's on the fringes of the points, and his teammates put it in third. So it goes to show what could have been available for Alpine this weekend, following an excellent race last time out, but not to be this weekend.
Yeah, that moment was actually funny. When it was shown on TV, just Esteban Ocon trundling down the pit lane, seeing that there's only one mechanic out there, and going, right, okay, let me do one more lap, and then come in and then get my tires changed, and then lose completely all of his progress because qualifying up in P11 on the fringe of the points is very good going. To say that Pierre Gasly qualified up in third. But all of his progress was essentially lost when he had to make two pit stops for the price of one. So I've settled with another 4 out of 10 for another driver because I think like you mentioned, he did lose communication, but it shouldn't happen. We're in an elite sport. These sort of things should not be happening. If it is happening, you've got the old-fashioned way of using pit boards. Why are they not telling Esteban Ocon to pit and kind of portraying that sort of communication? Because it may be old-fashioned, but it's still a very, very good way of communicating with your drivers. Even though they're going at rapid speeds, they are able to see that for a split second, and they know when to pit and when not to pit. It's a team error. And it's cost Esteban Ocon potential points because I think he was well on for some points, but a costly mistake from his team hampered him only to finish in P17. So it's a poor weekend for him, but from no fault of his own. But I've had to drop him down to a 4 out of 10 because of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, you do actually make a very good point there, is that, they still use the pit boards. They still display information on the pit boards. So why have they not used that to convey the message of pitting? So it's very, very strange one. Yeah, but you got to feel for Esteban Ocon slightly. And then the last of the finishers, we've got Valtteri Bottas, who qualified 19th and finished 18th. I've gone for a 4 out of 10 because, when his teammate had put in a very, very good performance, he did not. So I think the best part of Valtteri Bottas this weekend was that interview with Ted Kravitz, where he was talking about the t-shirts he was wearing, about what's next, and the funny moment that was there. But apart from that, nothing to shout about for Valtteri Bottas.
Do I give him a 10 out of 10 purely because of comedic effect? It'd be rude not to. No, I've settled with a 3. I think that it was very underwhelming for Valtteri Bottas, and like you said, the only good moment for Valtteri Bottas to come out of that race weekend was the "What's Next" t-shirts and the proceeds that are going to charities of people that have for families that um. Let me restart that the the t-shirts were arguably one of the best things for Valtteri Bottas because obviously the proceedings are going to a charity where people in families that have lost their jobs suddenly are able to kind of bounce back from the proceedings from this charity. So it's very nice to see Valtteri Bottas do that, but that's probably the only good thing that he did that weekend. On a racing standpoint, it was very poor.
And then on to the drivers that did not finish. Alex Albon up first, qualified in 18th and did not finish. I've actually gone for a 6 out of 10 for Alex Albon because he was in a position where he could have been fighting for points, but it just wasn't to be with that engine failure. I don't know whether he would have got points, but he was certainly within that sort of battle, and fighting all the way from 18th on the grid was not bad going at all.
Yeah, I've also gone with. I've not quite gone for a 6 out of 10. I've gone for a 5. Obviously, until he encountered that mistake, he was doing very, very well. But I don't think he can really give him a higher grade than that when he obviously didn't finish the race. I don't think you look on the face of things and you look, yeah, he's fighting for points, but they didn't actually materialize because of what was happening with his car and the overheating problem. So I've settled with a 5 out of 10, slap bang down middle of the road, just to be safe.
Well, you're going to hate my next grade then, because Pierre Gasly qualified in third and did not finish. I've gone for a 7 out of 10. I think he was in a position where, at the very worst, he finishes eighth, maybe even higher. Oscar Piastri wasn't on it this weekend. Fought well against the likes of Norris and the Ferraris early on, but obviously suffered that engine blow up as a result of getting a slipstream from Sonoda. Um, Very, very strange one, but he was performing very, very well at that point, and qualifying in third in that Alpine deserves commendation.
Props where props are due, but yeah, again, I'm sticking slap bang in the middle down the road, 5 out of 10. Once again, it's another driver of its and ifs and buts. That's why I've gone for a slap bang in the middle, 5 out of 10. Very good effort in qualifying, but once again, his engine went pop, and we didn't see much more of Pierre Gasly, so we couldn't see where he could have finished. He could have finished inside the points. He could have finished 17th. We don't know what could have happened with Pierre Gasly. But fantastic qualifying performance, just obviously didn't materialize in the race.
And now on to our predictions for Las Vegas. Do you want to kick things off by giving me your star predictions?
So for my first star prediction, I've actually gone with Ferrari to overtake McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. I see a very large swing in points.
For Vegas.
Oh, what? Fucking hell. Never mind then. Yeah, call them off. Because they're awful. That's all I'm gonna say. Call them off.
No, I'm not going to accept that. You got to give them.
Star prediction: safety car, Mercedes DNF. Didn't happen. So yeah.
Mixed bag for me. I had Haas points, and obviously Nico Hulkenberg got points, and I had a red flag in quali, which oh no, that did happen, didn't it? It did happen because of Colapinto's crash. It did happen. There was a red flag for that, wasn't there?
No, there wasn't. It was at the end of the session. They didn't
But
red flag it, I don't think.
it was
I'm
during the
gonna
session that they
I'm
had to
gonna
red flag it
VAR
at
it.
that
I'll
point.
VAR
Right,
it.
I'm going
I'll
to do some
VAR it.
research. Yeah, I'm going to do some research as well. And then we'll go through qualifying next. So that's 1 out of 2, maybe 2 out of 2. Qualifying, I got a big fat 0 out of 5. I went Leclerc, Norris, Sainz, Verstappen, Piastri. So 0 there. And then for the race, I went Leclerc, Sainz, Norris, Piastri, Verstappen. 1 out of 5. I got Verstappen in to finish in fifth. But that was that. So potentially 3 out of 12 there. Do you want to give me your qualifying and race predictions?
I'll just tell you that I got none out of 10. And yeah, I don't know what's up with me. I just think I've hit a roadblock when it comes to these things. It's so I went Norris, Leclerc, Sainz, Verstappen, Piastri, and I got that one wrong. And then for the race, I went Leclerc, Norris, Verstappen, Sainz, and Piastri. So yeah, I think this race um just wasn't the one. I have done my research. It has F1 did tweet big impact for Franco, but he's okay and out the car. So Colapinto's crash has brought Q2 to a close. So I don't know whether you can say red flag because they didn't actually specify that it was a red flag. It was at the end of a session. So I don't know whether I can give it to you. Don't know. Plus, I can't remember from the actual live uh when it happened live. I actually can't remember whether red flag was brought out or not.
So that's what I'm going to check right now. I'm going to go back through the stream and see if they did flag it. You got to be specific though. You got to give us your 1 to 5 for qualifying in the race.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
You can't just say you got 0 out of 5.
I just said it.
Oh, did you? All right, cut that bit out. Anyway, moving on now to the sprint weekend in Qatar. So I hope you got your sprint predictions as well. Do you want to kick things off with your 2 star predictions?
So before I made this little blunder, my first star prediction was for Ferrari to top the Constructors' Championship by the end of this race weekend. I see quite a big point swing in Ferrari's favour, and I do see um, a certain Oscar Piastri being on a little bit of a back burner this weekend in Qatar. And for my second star prediction, I've actually settled with I've actually settled for Haas points. I think Nico Hulkenberg will once again perform very well. I don't think Kevin Magnussen will be too far away as well. But I think that one of the two drivers will perform very well in Qatar.
So for me, I went for McLaren double podium and then Sonoda points. So that's for Sonoda points across the whole weekend. And I'm going to say there's got to be a double podium in the same race. So it can't just be one podium in one race, one podium in the next race. So it's double podium, I'm going to say. And I have actually got confirmation now that they didn't wave a red flag. It was just yellow flags at the end of the session, which is very frustrating. Do you
I'm
want to go and give
happy.
me your
I'm happy.
sprint predictions?
So for my sprint shootout and my sprint, let's go with the sprint shootout first. I've gone with Leclerc topping sprint shootout, with George Russell and Lando Norris rounding off the top three. Max Verstappen in fourth and Carlos Sainz in fifth. And then in the sprint race, I've gone with Lando Norris taking the victory, going from P3 to P1. Leclerc in second, Verstappen in third, George Russell in fourth, and Carlos Sainz in fifth.
And then for me, I went for Oscar Piastri, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, and George Russell for sprint qualifying. And then for the sprint race, I went for Oscar Piastri, Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, and George Russell again. For the main event, I went for Leclerc in to get pole, Piastri second, Sainz third, Verstappen fourth, and Norris fifth. And then I went for Piastri to get the race win in the main event, with Leclerc second, Norris third, Sainz fourth, and Verstappen fifth. Do you want to give me your main race predictions?
Qualifying, I've gone with a 1-2 for Ferrari, with Charles Leclerc in first and Carlos Sainz in second. I've gone with Lando Norris in third, Lewis Hamilton in fourth, and Max Verstappen in fifth. And for the main race, I've gone with Team Carlos getting the race victory, with Carlos Sainz in first, Lando Norris in second, with Charles Leclerc rounding off a podium in third, Max Verstappen fourth, and Oscar Piastri in fifth.
And then just before we end this podcast, we were also looking at Formula 2. So that is back for the penultimate weekend. The first race since Baku, where Vishal got the victory with Martin second and Kimi Antonelli in third. Who's your money on this weekend?
Who's my money on? It could be on any of the drivers because it's such an open championship. But between the actual championship protagonists, I think Bortoleto will just edge it. He's obviously 4.5 points ahead of Isaac Hadjar in second, and he's over 30 points ahead of Zane Maloney in third. But I think if I'm not mistaken, Zane Maloney is out of his seat in Formula Two. And it's and he I don't think he will be racing anymore in Formula Two. So it is essentially down to Gabriel Bortoleto and Isaac Hadjar. You could technically throw Paul Aaron in there with a shout as well, the championship leader from a couple of rounds ago. He led the championship for a long time. But obviously he's faded away a little bit. He's 36.5 points, 6.5 points behind Gabriel Bortoleto. So it's essentially between Bortoleto and Hadjar. But I think Bortoleto will just edge it. I think the driver that's destined for Formula One next season will just edge the championship battle. And I think he'll put on another display of another a masterclass somewhere to extend his lead even more in the championship and to show why Sauber have done the right thing by signing him for 2025 onwards.
Yeah, so just to go through the driver standards currently. So Gabriel Bortoleto is leading on 169.5 points, 4.5 ahead of Isaac Hadjar. Zay Maloney is third, as you said, 30 points further back. Paul Aaron on 133, just 2 points behind Maloney. Jack Crawford is then on 116 in fifth place, 3 points ahead of Kimi Antonelli on 113. And then in seventh place, now I think this is somebody who could make a championship push. Franco Colapinto, 2 races to go. Can he fight for the title?
Great
Of course,
banter, ha
Franco
ha,
Colapinto
very
is
funny.
fighting in Formula One now these days. But anyway, thank you all for listening to this podcast. We'll be back next week where we'll be looking at our predictions and looking at the 1 to 10 driver ratings yet again for Qatar and looking ahead to the last race of the season in Abu Dhabi. Thank you all for listening and goodbye.